Thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me here and for this wonderful conference. It's been so stimulating that I reorganized the whole conference last night, and I will jump into it, the whole presentation. For those of you who were not here yesterday, okay, so this is an example of what we do. This is Shay. She was born, if you look carefully, missing fingers on one hand, and she's putting on a 3D printed plastic device made by a volunteer, and she's bending her wrist, and that makes a fist, and she smiles, and this is what we do. This is the whole story. We make children smile, we make parents weep, and we make nerds rejoice. And that's the whole story. Now, yesterday we met, and today we will again meet the people from TIE Reach, but you can see that TIE Reach is now one of many e-NABLE chapters all over the world, and I have to say that while it was an accident, this has become something of a global movement. And in particular, from the point of view of exponential thinking, I think it's really an instructive case to think about. So I want to try to draw out some of the things that we are learning as we do this, and some of the things we still don't know. We were very lucky. e-NABLE represents the convergence of many different exponential technologies and emerging trends. Open source software, collaborative innovation, internet-based facilitation, 3D printing, obviously, mass customization, crowdsourced, distributed manufacturing. They all came together with e-NABLE. But in the last few years, I've also become clear about some additional elements which are not so common and which I think are really worth talking about. And here's the ones I want to emphasize today. There is a good enough philosophy, which I will explain. There is a humanistic philosophy, and increasingly I'm coming to realize that there is a distributed organization, which is an emerging pattern for all of our industries and for our non-industries. These also are exponential trends. In fact, one of the exponential patterns that I didn't hear discussed here, but I will remind you, is Metcalfe's law. We talked about Moore's law. We've talked about exponential growth. Metcalfe recognized that in a network, as the number of nodes increases linearly, the number of connections increases exponentially. And as I talk about e-NABLE, I want you to notice how much of what has emerged pretty much on its own and without any great pre-planning has been based on this principle of connectivity, social networks, and spontaneous organization. For me, this all started when I saw a YouTube video about a South African carpenter who had lost fingers. He used the internet to find this guy, a puppet maker who had made a curious contraption. They found each other through the internet. They collaborated across the world, first using video conferencing and email, then using 3D printers, and they came up with a simple mechanical product. I saw this video and I noticed that the comments on the YouTube videos were actually very positive. And as you know, YouTube video comments are usually totally demoralizing. And so I put my own comment there. I said, I've made a Google map. You can put pins on it. And if you know someone who needs a hand, put a pin on the map. And if you're willing to help with your own 3D printer, put a pin on the map. I did this one morning while I was avoiding preparing my classes. And that night, there were 7 pins on the map. And within 6 weeks, there were 70 pins on the map. And people started calling me and saying, okay, now what do we do? And I had no idea. So I created a Google Plus community, which grew. And as you may know, Google Plus disappeared just last month, but there were 10,000 registrations by the time it disappeared, and we've now migrated to a new platform. All of this developed pretty much on its own, and despite the fact that I actually did not imagine that it was going to work. It was just a little thought experiment, which turned into a real experiment. So here's the good enough philosophy. In the last session, I told Scott Summit that I've never seen a design from him that wasn't beautiful and inspiring. Well, you're not going to teach this in the engineering schools. You're not going to hear this from medical professionals, but I think it's our job to put out devices that are embarrassingly incomplete. If it's substantially better than nothing, and if most people have nothing, then you're indulging yourself if you withhold your creation just because it's not up to your professional standards. So the devices I'm going to show you are actually somewhat embarrassing. But I'm proud to be embarrassed because I think we make a contribution that way. You can see that these devices, even though they're plastic, kids can take them swimming, they can do things with them, they enjoy them, and while the prosthetists look at them and say, you know, these things are plastic, they look like toys, the kids look at them and they say, these things are plastic, they look like toys, and they use them, whereas professional medical grade prosthetics, while they are much better feats of engineering, are typically not used by children. They're not used by adults that often either. They're very valuable, but because we were willing to put out things like this, which used PVC water pipe and elbow actuation when we didn't know anything else to do, they've opened up a whole new design space and a whole new way of dealing with these kinds of things. So you can see that the original device up at the top left was quite crude, but these devices have evolved in just 4 or 5 years, so that now we have a variety of models, and in fact, here they are. So you can see, this was designed, by the way, by someone who received an arm from us. His arm ends here. He couldn't get the prosthetic he needed. He was able to download one of our designs. In fact, he started with this crude thing. He adapted something done by another designer, and he's produced something which is rather sophisticated, quite nice, still available for free and to be downloaded. This is as sophisticated a device as we have done. It's very effective. It's becoming adopted, but it's actually fairly difficult to assemble. However, our volunteers not only produce open source designs, they also produce videos to teach each other how to do these kinds of things. My lab has been focusing on dumb, simple, embarrassing devices. This hand has one moving part, but that moving part will hold on to things by itself. And you'll notice we're also using interesting materials like bottles here in order to produce devices that are by no means up to medical standards, but are substantially better than nothing and provide an interesting platform for other people, including the recipients themselves, to build upon and improve. So that's the substantially better than nothing design philosophy, and I really do recommend it to you. I really think that it's important to remember that while we here are all enthralled by the newest, greatest, most sophisticated technology, the point of this technology should be to address unmet needs, and the world is full of unmet needs, which can be met, by the way, by Thai students who don't have to be sophisticated. They actually have to be willing to try, and then they can do things. But there's another secret to our success, and that has to do with what I'm calling the humanistic philosophy. In some ways, it's a matter of marketing. I like to call this young man our director of marketing. because while he was born without fingers, he obviously was born with one of the best smiles on the planet. And he was photographed saying, "Look, I got a new Iron Man hand." And the photograph found its way to Fox News. Fox News put it on the internet. It went all over the world. Again, I want you to notice that the viral spread of these images and these ideas are an important part of the story. And within weeks of this story going viral, the e-NABLE community was producing Iron Man hands, Wolverine hands, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle hands. The whole thing has gotten sort of out of hand. But you know, if you think about it, the superhero idea is actually exactly the right idea. I mean, this is the month of superhero mania, but for a long time, we've been using this mythology to recognize that all of us have some sort of a flaw, and then some kind of magic or technology or a mysterious community on the internet comes up with something that gives us superpowers. The meaning of these devices, the social meaning, the psychological meaning, is at least as important as the mechanical and engineering function of these devices. And this became really clear when this young man, Nathaniel, was interviewed 6 weeks before he got the device. Okay, so I'm very proud of our devices. I'm equally proud of our social network and the way it works. And in this case, we have an experiment where a kid was demonstrating the meaning of the device, and he did not yet have the device. He said, you know, I was born missing fingers, and he shows his hand, and I am counting the days until I get my new hand as a Christmas present. But then he went on to say something out loud that we suspected for some time. He said, you know, I have bad dreams, and in these dreams there are monsters who come chasing after me. And now I just turn to them and say, you don't scare me because I have 2 hands. Now, he doesn't have the device, and yet it's clearly changing the way he's thinking about it. We've noticed, and I think we even saw in the video about Nurit, who we'll be seeing soon, that when we meet these kids for the first time, they're often walking around like this. They're often trying to conceal the thing that makes them special. Once they have the device, they're superheroes, they're showing it off. It changes the conversation, and it changes their confidence, and it changes the way they interact with their peers. And it's not just children. This is something I'm still learning. It was only 6 months ago when I was in Honduras that I met these 2 guys who got e-NABLE arms from another chapter in Latin America. And both of them lost 2 arms in electrical accidents. They both became unemployable, but after they got their arms, they both started their own businesses. I asked them, how often do you wear your arm? These were 2 different conversations. Because even with medical grade prosthetics, the answer is often, oh, once or twice a week, whenever I need to really do something. They both said, oh, every day. I put it on in the morning, I take it on at night. That was interesting. I asked Juan, well, what's the most important thing you do with your hand? And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, well, this is the most important thing I do with my hand. I get to hold my little girl's hand, and I can go for a walk with her. When I asked Christopher the same question, and he had just demonstrated that he's able to handle the sandals, and his whole shop was based on what he was now able to do, he said, well, what I really like is that when I go out drinking with my friends, I can do a fist bump with them. The social function of these devices is really important. So between the good enough philosophy, between the viral marketing of this human-centered psychological approach, and a few other things, e-NABLE is now in chapters all over the world and has developed a really interesting form of organization, which is in part a side effect of the side effects of exponential technology. Let me say what I mean. All right, so I got the curves here. But we found, actually, that as we grew exponentially, and as the number of interactions within our community began to happen, we reached a point where the nicest people on the planet, all of these enabled volunteers, began sniping and arguing with each other. And we actually went from a central organization to a distributed organization of independent chapters, because exponential technology can also be toxic. Because, and I think this is the same thing we're seeing with the social networks and American politics right now, you can reach a point of hyper-connectivity where you go from everything's going great to, uh-oh, we have problems. And by the way, I think all of us are dealing with a number of really big problems, which are also products of exponential technology. Carbon levels, plastic levels, toxic internet sociology, mass extinctions, these are all real problems that are increasing exponentially as side effects of what we're doing with exponential technology. Now, there is an emerging pattern which we sort of stumbled into, which is, as I say, something that's happening now, which is that we're going from centralized organization to this pattern, which is called the Starfish Pattern, right? A spider and a mammal has a central nervous system. You knock out the central nervous system, everything falls apart. Starfish and networks are much more distributed. They're much more robust, and they can spread exponentially. That's much more what e-NABLE is like. This is my map of our current ecosystem. As you can see, it's rich and it's complicated, and there is no central control. And that's one of the reasons it has worked. Now, this is a complicated slide, but that's not the point. The real point is that we need to figure out how to go from few people to many people. And all of us are familiar with this model, a command and control architecture, in which you start with visionaries like the speakers at this conference. And they start companies and they become employers and they get managers and commanders, and behind them is the monetary system, another exponential technology, which is perhaps running out of control, and behind them, the threat of force. In a global network of volunteers, we have none of those things. I have thousands of people working with us, and I can't hire them, and I can't fire them. And so we have to figure out how to inspire them. And so I want to close just by talking a little bit about what is our alternative way of organizing people, and suggest that it may be something for all of us to think about. We are not a finance or coercion-based organization. We can't and don't tell anyone what to do. But we have found that this is a helpful model, or I find this to be a helpful model. You may be familiar with this. This is the concept of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It basically says, all of us struggle, life is suffering, but different people have different problems. All of us have to make sure that our physiological needs are met. We need food, we need water, we need shelter. When that's covered, we worry about finding mates and partners. When that's covered, we worry about, are we doing the right things with our lives? When that's covered, we're still unhappy because we're wondering if we're doing the right thing to leave our mark on the planet. There's a really interesting partnership that is developed in e-NABLE between people like me who have the luxury most of the time of feeling that we're in the pointy end of that pyramid, who interact with other people who are dealing with some more profound challenges. And so the most meaningful work that I get to do is to collaborate with people like Nurit to try to bring these things together. This is not charity. It's not even a caring economy. It's a caring ecology. And if exponential technologies work the way we want them to, if indeed energy is soon to be free, and robots and exoskeletons do all of the heavy lifting, one of the big questions is going to be, what are people for? And we'd better be thinking about this. My suggestion is that this may well be what people are for. If we make it through the next era, our mission is going to be to collaborate, to heal the planet, and to heal the divides in our society, and to try to bring together institutional, organizational, and, if you will, value-based exponential humanity. So I will close, but I will point out that exponential technology can augment and empower, and that's our job, is to make sure it does that, because it can also engulf and devour. Exponential technology doesn't care. It's just technology. But we care, we humans care, and our children will care. And by the way, one of the interesting things about that moment when the lines begin to cross and you wonder whether we're going from so far so good to uh-oh, is that people who are speaking articulately today are telling us that when they are our age, whatever we do now is going to have profound effects on their lives. Exponential technologies have great power and offer great peril, and that means that we have a particular responsibility. So when I give a hand to a kid these days, I have a little ritual I like to go through. This is Sean. We gave him a hand just 3 weeks ago. I said, Sean, with great hands comes great responsibility. You've got a new arm now, but it's not as good as we want. We're a little bit embarrassed about it. I want you to teach us how to make it better. And you know, Sean believes me. And so I sort of believe it too. And Sean also asked me one other question. He asked me this twice. He said, are you from the future? And he asked me that again. The second time I said, well, I hope so. And that depends on you, and it depends on you. And it depends on our collaborators here at TiE Reach and Nurit. So if you will all come up, we get to finish this particular story. So the TiE chapter, and hello Nurit, has been working on this process. Nurit got an arm a few weeks ago. He modified it according to his own needs and his own aesthetics, and that then told us how to work with him to produce something that would be even better for him and more like what he wants, not what we want. And so at this point, James and Kung and Yui are going to present him with a new and improved 3D printed e-NABLE arm.
This is called the Kawabu 2, and you've seen a slide earlier.
There we go. Yes. It'll take some practice, but it's a start. It's a handsome object there. Oh, and it's adjustable, and it's lockable. He's been practicing. Very good. Congratulations.
I actually believe this is the Kawabu 2.1 that it's all software, so the designer came up with some modifications in like the last 2 months.
And Nurit, with great power comes great responsibility. We are counting on you to take this forward, and as a matter of fact, the organizers of this conference, and here I would ask Mr. Supang to come up, the organizers of this conference have begun collaborating with us to help develop this kind of partnership between this values-based collaborative enterprise and the hierarchical institutions which we all also depend on. So Mr. Supang, do you want to take the next step?
ก็ขอคือในฐานะตัวแทนสภาอุตสาหกรรม for our Federation of Thai Industry I want to donate the time for him. Yeah, thank you very much for let's out. We have this kind of opportunity to do the donation. Thank you.
It's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this work continues, and by the way, as you have seen, there are plenty of opportunities for partnerships between commercial organizations and these volunteer organizations, and the people from Thai Reach and the people from enable.org would be very happy to continue the conversation with you as well. Thank you all very much.